Picture this. You're minding your own business, just enjoying a peaceful evening, and someone decides to turn it into a public nightmare. He thought he could say whatever he wanted and walk away without a scratch. But let's just say, this night will stick with him a lot longer than it will with me. And trust me, this is only the beginning. The sun dipped lower into the horizon, painting the skies of New Haven in fiery hues of orange and pink. The suburban park buzzed with its usual end-of-day energy. Joggers puffing along the trails, kids squealing on the playground, and a few scattered groups chatting on benches. On the tree-lined central path, the figure of Karen Walters stood out like a striking portrait against the fading light. At 32, Karen wasn't just a teacher, she was a walking emblem of resilience and pride. Her vibrant African patterned dress, a gift from her mother, flowed elegantly as she moved. It wasn't just clothing, it was a statement. She wore it with the confidence of someone who knew exactly who they were and dared anyone to question it. Tonight, she had decided to treat herself to an ice cream, a small act of self-care after a week of grading endless essays and managing hormonal teenagers in her English classes. She approached the ice cream cart, the scent of waffle cones mixing with the crisp evening air. The vendor greeted her with a warm smile as she ordered a scoop of mango sorbet. It was supposed to be a peaceful moment, a quiet victory against the week's chaos, but peace had other plans. Out of the corner of her eye, Karen noticed a man lumbering toward her. He was hard to miss, mid-50s, a beer belly stretching his faded jeans, and a face set in a permanent scowl. His battered baseball cap, emblazoned with the slogan, "America First," tilted slightly over his furrowed brow. His eyes locked onto Karen like a heat-seeking missile, and she felt the incoming storm before he even opened his mouth. "Hey," he barked, his voice as gruff as a busted muffler. "What's with the costume? You heading to some kind of carnival?" Karen barely glanced his way, choosing instead to focus on her melting sorbet. People like him weren't worth her energy. She'd mastered the art of selective deafness long ago, but unfortunately for her, this guy didn't take hints. He took a step closer, his tone laced with mockery. "Oh, I get it. You're trying to show off, huh? Maybe you should skip the theatrics and just get yourself a one-way ticket back to Africa. Save us all the headache." The words hit like a brick wall, jarring her from the calm she'd been holding onto. Around her, the park seemed to fall into a collective hush. A few heads turned, and though most people pretended not to notice, Karen could feel their curiosity buzzing. Phones began to discreetly rise, the glowing screens betraying the silent witnesses. Karen turned slowly, locking her eyes onto him with a cool, unflinching gaze. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice calm but steely. "Did you just say something to me?" He smirked, his confidence swelling with the attention. "You heard me, lady. Go back to wherever you came from. This country doesn't need people like you ruining it." For a moment, Karen felt her pulse hammering in her ears. Anger coiled tight in her chest, demanding release. But she steadied herself, taking a deep breath. Meeting his glare with unnerving composure, she stepped forward slightly, her voice as sharp as glass. "Are you sure you want to keep going with this?" she asked, her words measured, her tone cold enough to freeze his bravado. By now, a small crowd had begun to gather. Whispered comments floated through the air, and Karen caught the telltale gleam of camera lenses in the dying sunlight. This was no longer just a random park encounter. It was a public spectacle. Dale, emboldened by the growing audience, puffed out his chest. "You think you're some kind of hero, huh? Let me tell you something. People like you are the reason this country's falling apart." Karen clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. It would have been so easy, so satisfying, to unleash her fury right then and there. But she knew better. People like him thrived on chaos, on dragging others down to their level. She wasn't about to give him that satisfaction. Instead, she straightened her posture, her eyes narrowing. Around her, the murmurs of the crowd grew louder. Someone muttered, "Is she gonna say something?" Another whispered, "This guy's out of line." Karen wasn't just holding back for herself. She was holding back for the people who were now looking at her as more than just a target. She could feel the weight of their expectations. Whatever she did next, it had to count. And so, with her heart pounding but her voice steady, Karen leaned forward and said, "If you're so eager to embarrass yourself, Don't let me stop you. Go ahead, keep talking. The man's face reddened, but before he could respond, the crowd began to stir. The tension was palpable, hanging thick in the air. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The tension was thick enough to slice with a knife. The scene had gone from uncomfortable to outright chaotic, and Karen could feel the shift in the air. A crowd had formed, drawn by the raised voices and unmistakable sense that something big was about to go down. "Dude, chill out. She's literally just eating ice cream," a young guy in a hoodie shouted from the sidelines, his tone a mix of disbelief and irritation. Dale, visibly agitated, whipped his head around like a cornered animal. "This ain't your business, kid. Why don't you mind your own, huh?" Karen took a step forward, planting herself firmly between Dale and the growing crowd. Her voice, calm but unyielding, cut through the noise like a blade. "Look," she said, her gaze locked onto Dale. "Whatever this is, your anger doesn't belong here. I'm not going anywhere." Dale sneered, his lips curling into a smug grin. "Oh, you want a lesson? 'Cause I'll be happy to explain how things work around here." His tone dripped with condescension, like he was itching for a fight he thought he'd already won. But Karen wasn't about to let him take control of the narrative. Without breaking eye contact, she calmly pulled out her phone, her finger steady as she hit the record button. "Please," she said, holding the device up for all to see, "go ahead. Tell the world how things work. Don't hold back." For a moment, Dale froze, caught off guard by her sudden move. His face turned an unflattering shade of red as the realization dawned on him. He was being recorded. "What's this for, huh? You trying to make me the bad guy here?" Karen's expression didn't waver. Her voice, steady and deliberate, carried over the murmurs of the crowd. "I just want everyone to see how easily hate can be used to tear someone down. That's all." The crowd stirred, a ripple of approval spreading through the bystanders. Someone shouted, "Yeah, Karen, let him have it." Another voice chimed in, "You got this, girl." Dale's frustration boiled over. He lunged forward, his hands swiping toward Karen's phone, but he didn't get far. The young guy in the hoodie was faster, stepping in with a shove that sent Dale stumbling back. "Whoa, man, what do you think you're doing?" the kid said, his voice laced with righteous anger. "Get your hands off me, you little punk," Dale barked, his composure slipping further by the second. But the crowd wasn't having it. "You're out of line, dude. Back off," a voice called from the back. "Leave her alone," another echoed. Karen seized the moment. Raising her voice so it carried over the commotion, she declared, "Everyone saw that, right? Keep recording. The world needs to see what happens when hate thinks it can win." Dale's bravado was visibly cracking. The red blotches on his face deepened as he took a shaky step back. The weight of the crowd's disapproval pressed down on him, and for the first time, he looked unsure of himself. And then, as if on cue, 2 park security officers appeared, their yellow vests catching the last rays of the setting sun. One of them, a tall man with a no-nonsense demeanor, stepped forward and raised his hand to quiet the crowd. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone authoritative but calm. Before Karen could respond, Dale pointed an accusatory finger at her. "She's the problem. She's out here stirring up trouble." Karen didn't flinch. Holding up her phone, she gestured to the crowd. "There are plenty of videos that tell a different story. Would you like to see them?" The security officer glanced at the phone still held high, his brow furrowing. "All right," he said, addressing the crowd. "Anyone got footage? Let's see it." Several people stepped forward, offering their recordings. As the officers reviewed the clips, the crowd waited in tense silence. Dale, now visibly sweating, shifted nervously on his feet. When the officer finally looked up, his expression was unreadable. "Sir," he said, turning to Dale, "you're going to need to come with us. Let's sort this out somewhere quieter." "What? You can't be serious," Dale sputtered, his voice climbing an octave. "I didn't do anything wrong." But the crowd's collective judgment had already sealed his fate. As the officers led Dale away, a wave of applause broke out. Karen stood tall, her phone still in hand, the weight of the moment sinking in. The young guy in the hoodie gave her a nod of respect. "You handled that like a pro," he said, a grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. Karen exhaled, the tension finally beginning to ease from her shoulders. "Thanks," she said simply. Then, turning to the crowd, she added, "Thanks to all of you. Today, We proved that hate doesn't get the last word." The applause grew louder, and for the first time that evening, Karen allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. The crowd was buzzing, a mix of murmurs and whispers swirling in the tense air. People instinctively stepped back as the park's security officer, a tall and imposing man with a calm but commanding presence, approached. His name tag read M. Johnson, but to anyone who frequented the park, he was just Mark, a guy who didn't mess around when things got heated. "What's going on here?" Mark asked, his deep voice cutting through the chatter. He scanned the scene with sharp eyes, noting the strained faces and phones still pointed in the air. Dale, clearly seeing this as his golden opportunity to flip the narrative, jabbed a finger in Karen's direction. "Her! She's the one causing trouble, provoking me for no reason." His tone had shifted to something resembling desperation, but his words were delivered with an air of faux confidence, as if he could will the crowd to believe him. Karen, however, was done playing along. She stepped forward, her heels clicking against the pavement with the kind of authority that turned heads. "Provoking you?" she repeated, her voice calm but edged with steel. "This man told me to go back to Africa and then tried to grab my phone when I started recording. Dozens of people here have videos. Want to see for yourself?" Mark's eyebrows lifted slightly as he turned to the crowd. "Anyone got footage?" he asked, his tone neutral but firm. Immediately, hands shot up like a forest of neon-glowing devices. "Right here!" someone shouted while others stepped closer, eager to show their recordings. The hum of overlapping voices filled the air as people began playing their clips, each one showing the same damning scene: Dale's aggressive words, his attempt to swipe Karen's phone, and the crowd stepping in to defend her. Mark studied the videos with a furrowed brow, occasionally glancing at Dale, whose once bold posture was now shrinking by the second. "All right," Mark finally said, straightening up and fixing Dale with a look that could melt steel. "Sir, you're going to need to come with me." "What?" Dale's voice cracked as his arms flailed slightly. No, you've got this all wrong. I'm the victim here. They're all ganging up on me." Mark crossed his arms, unbothered by the outburst. "The videos tell a different story," he said simply. Then, as if on cue, two uniformed police officers emerged from the edge of the crowd, summoned by the park staff. They approached with calm efficiency, nodding to Mark before one of them addressed Dale. "We've seen enough," one officer said, his tone clipped but professional. "Let's talk over here." Dale's protests grew louder as the officers guided him away, his voice rising above the now cheering crowd. "You're making a mistake. I didn't do anything. She set me up." But his words fell flat, drowned out by the applause and scattered shouts of encouragement directed toward Karen. Karen stood frozen for a moment, her phone still clutched tightly in her hand. She felt the adrenaline slowly draining, leaving her slightly shaky but resolute. A young man in a hoodie, probably the same guy who had defended her earlier, stepped closer, his expression equal parts admiration and awe. "Hey," he said, his voice warm and sincere. "You were amazing back there. Seriously. That was next level." Karen gave him a small, grateful smile. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer now. She turned to address the crowd, lifting her chin as she spoke. "And thank you to everyone who stood up today. You proved that silence only helps the wrong side. We're stronger together." Her words hung in the air like a rallying cry, drawing a second wave of applause. Karen took a deep breath, finally allowing herself to exhale the tension she had been holding on to. By the time she got home, the footage of the incident had already exploded online. The videos, shared by dozens of witnesses, racked up views at an astonishing rate. Comments poured in, filled with messages of support, outrage, and calls for accountability. Overnight, Karen became a local symbol of standing up to hate. For Karen, though, it wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about showing that one voice, amplified by a community, could challenge even the loudest of aggressors. And as she sat down to finally enjoy a quiet moment, the soft glow of her phone screen reflected in her determined eyes, she knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. What would you have done in Karen's place? Do you think she handled the situation well? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know if you or someone you know has experienced something similar. Don't forget to like and share to spread awareness. This story was created to shed light on the issue of discrimination and to inspire positive change. Your voice matters, and together we can work toward a better, more inclusive world.